You've probably been told to fake it till you make it. But here's the problem. Most people keep faking it and never actually make it. Fake confidence might get you a quick dopamine boost from likes or applause, but those spikes are short-lived. Recent neuroscience and behavioral research shows that externally driven rewards can feel good in the moment while quietly undermining the sustained focus needed for deep work. The key difference is this. Fleeting validation runs on short-term highs, while real, productive confidence is built on actions that leave lasting evidence. So here's a quick test. Open your Notes app right now and write down one task you can finish in the next 10 minutes. That's your first piece of proof. Because once you see what actually moves the needle, you'll also see why the version of confidence most people chase is the one that keeps them stuck. The myth that's wasting your time. Most of what you've been taught about confidence comes from a shallow place. We're told it's about posture, tone of voice, or a polished image, things that can be packaged into social media clips and sold as quick fixes. The problem is that while these cues might help you look different on the outside, they rarely help you get through the hours of focus required to actually complete meaningful work. And that's the myth that's wasting your time, mistaking the performance of confidence for the practice of it. This myth is exhausting because people spend so much energy polishing the surface without seeing results underneath. They scroll through endless posts about how to stand taller, how to enter a room with authority, or how to mimic the power habits of influencers. They internalize the idea that confidence is charisma and then try to manufacture it by rehearsing body language or adjusting their tone. But here's the caution. While posture or movement can give you a quick lift in mood, research shows those effects are fleeting. They're not a substitute for work. When all of your energy is spent on maintaining an image, very little remains for the projects that actually carry you forward. That's what drains people, not the effort itself, but the misdirection of that effort. You invest in appearance instead of outcomes, and then you wonder why the needle didn't move. Think of the predictable cycle so many fall into. Someone sees a carefully curated morning routine online, icy showers, blender shakes, meditation cushions, the works, and they copy it step for step. For a while, it feels like progress because the ritual itself looks disciplined. They might even document it, sharing photos of their 5 a.m. wake-up like evidence of change. But then deadlines still slip, assignments still pile, and late-night emergencies return. What's really happening? The ritual gave the feeling of progress, but not the substance of it. It filled the time without producing a stack of completed work to point back to. That's the hidden trap of confidence myths. They take behaviors that look admirable from the outside and present them as substitutes for measurable output. What actually builds confidence is very different. It doesn't come from standing tall or drinking green juices. It comes from the record you build with yourself, the bank of evidence that shows you follow through. Every finished task, no matter how small, is a deposit into that bank. And when it's full, you don't need to psych yourself up before starting because the proof is already there. Recent behavioral research underlines this. Confidence based on repeated actions, known as self-efficacy, is more stable and longer-lasting than confidence based on image or performance alone. One is durable because it's earned. The other is fragile because it depends on how convincing you look in a given moment. The frustrating part is how easily the performance-based version thrives in public spaces. Social media amplifies whatever is most visual, and external cues like clothing, poses, or routines are easy to showcase. Actual deep work, the kind that builds sustained confidence, is invisible. No one cheers you for sitting quietly at a desk to finish writing or for logging study hours without posting about them. So people get pulled toward what looks flashy, and because it's visible, they assume it's effective. They imitate the visible while neglecting the invisible, and that's what keeps them circling the same problems. But the truth is simple. Confidence that lasts is built from outcomes, not optics. Consider someone who decides to block out just 30 focused minutes each morning, not as a ritual but as work time. After 30 days, there's no viral photo to post, but there are 15 hours of completed action. That record is invisible to the crowd but visible to the person doing it. And that difference is profound. When the next challenge arrives, they don't have to inflate themselves with positive affirmations or fake high-energy poses. They look back at their evidence and know, I did this before, I can do it again. That's a source of confidence no image can replace. Of course, this idea can be unsettling because it dismantles a belief system that so many people have relied on. Performance confidence feels accessible and exciting. Execution confidence demands patience and persistence. But once someone experiences the reliability of action-driven confidence, the trade becomes obvious. They stop asking whether they feel ready and instead just begin. They lean on the weight of their completed work, not on how well they've sold themselves to others. Over time, procrastination doesn't just shrink, it gets replaced with a quiet certainty, because history shows them they can handle what comes next. That's what makes the myth so costly. It doesn't just waste your time, it steals your energy by redirecting it toward theater instead of tasks. It teases you with visible progress markers, but withholds the deeper benefits of consistent follow-through. And while it may keep people entertained or motivated for a few moments, it creates a dependence on appearance that can't sustain itself when pressure mounts. So the question now becomes, why do these glossy versions of confidence hold such power? Why do so many highly advertised routines and high-energy performances leave people feeling drained instead of driven, even when they look inspiring at first glance? The answer lies in what's happening inside your brain. Fake confidence destroys focus. Why does fake confidence undermine your ability to stay locked in on a task? At first glance, it seems like it should help. When you watch someone on stage pouring energy into the room or listen to a speaker shouting affirmations about limitless potential, the rush feels powerful. In the moment, you feel switched on, motivated, almost unstoppable. But if you've noticed that the surge fades within hours, leaving you flat and restless instead of focused, that isn't a flaw in your personality, it's a flaw in the system. What feels like empowerment is often just a burst of hype with no anchor behind it. And that's exactly why fake confidence destroys focus. Your brain reacts strongly to signs of approval, likes, validation, uplifting slogans. These cues set off the same reward pathways that light up when you receive praise or recognition. The immediate hit feels satisfying because dopamine is released, reinforcing the rush. But here's the catch. Short dopamine bursts from external validation reward the feeling, not the follow-through. Instead of embedding the discipline needed for steady work, the brain tags the applause or high-energy state as the prize. Over time, this trains you to look for more stimulation, rather than holding still long enough to finish something meaningful. Here's a simple way to see it at work. Imagine you sit down to complete a task, and after 20 or 30 minutes, the excitement starts wearing off. Do you push through the discomfort of the work, or find yourself clicking away in search of another motivational clip, another pep talk, another reminder that you're great? If that cycle feels familiar, you've seen how the system reroutes your attention. A spike, a drop, then a search for another high. Try noticing this the next time you work. Catch the moment when your brain starts craving a boost, and ask whether you're seeking progress or just another hit of stimulation. And this is the crucial point. Fake confidence feels strong but is structurally weak. It hooks you on anticipation of applause. Behavioral findings back this up. More expectation doesn't guarantee better performance, and misplaced confidence can actually reduce output. In practice, that means you might store hours of hype without evidence of progress. The ritual feels like motion, but the work remains untouched. That's why people end up confused. They assume motivation is slipping, but in truth, they are chaining their focus to external fuel that doesn't last. This kind of confidence is engineered to be loud but shallow. It allows you to look engaged with growth while quietly training your brain to equate inspiration with achievement. Months later, despite all the effort spent chasing energy, the work you wanted to complete never materialized. The split becomes especially obvious when silence shows up. Sitting with deep work requires an ability to manage boredom and monotony, but hype-driven confidence teaches you the opposite. When silence arrives, no applause, no cheer, your attention starts to itch. Instead of leaning into the task in front of you, you look elsewhere for stimulation. The real cost is not just distraction, but erosion of your ability to tolerate the plain rhythm that underpins meaningful output. You can see this play out in groups too. At first, followers of these high-energy systems feel bonded, convinced they've cracked the code. They trade affirmations and share boosts of encouragement. But over time, burnout slips in. The gap between big emotional moments and actual results grows harder to ignore. What began as community starts to fray under disappointment because people realize that attention has been captured without outcomes to match. And this isn't because they lacked willpower. It's because their motivation was pulled toward external display, not private consistency. From a neuroscience perspective, the mechanism is straightforward. Sustained focus depends on networks in the prefrontal cortex, which support planning, persistence, and control over attention. These are strengthened through repeated action and reinforcement of follow-through, not short-lived highs. By contrast, fake confidence centers activity in the brain's short-term reward circuits. When those dominate, the signal teaches you to return to whatever gave the immediate thrill rather than stay with the less glamorous process of grinding through a task. Evidence-backed actions strengthen the very networks that support focus. Emotional hype leaves them undertrained. Over time, the consequences multiply. That fiery burst of fake confidence makes you expect constant excitement, which erodes stamina. It lowers your tolerance for boredom, the space where most progress actually develops. You begin to believe that work should always feel charged, when in reality, slow repetitions and unfinished drafts are what shape ability. This mismatch convinces people they've failed whenever the spark dips, even though discomfort is a normal part of producing something real. The hidden danger is the memory your brain records in the background. Each time you chase the high and abandon the work, your subconscious logs a note. Another task started, another task dropped. Even though you can turn on excitement at will, the deeper record reflects inconsistency. That track erodes self-trust. So while the surface displays energy, the foundation becomes more uncertain. You hesitate next time, not because of lack of slogans, but because you remember the emptiness that followed the last burst. This is the trap of fake confidence. It looks like a resource but behaves like a drain. It trains you to chase sugar highs instead of building muscle. It diverts energy from the circuits that sustain focus and gives it to the fleeting chase for attention. It convinces you to count the applause as progress, while the actual tasks sit undone. And every time that cycle repeats, the core problem deepens. You have less capacity to stay still, to think, to finish. Understanding this is critical because the problem isn't just wasted time, it's wasted attention. The patterns you reinforce become habits, and habits determine whether your future self trusts you or doubts you. If your confidence is depending on temporary thrill, the cost is not just today's work, but tomorrow's belief in your ability to handle more. The more you lean on hype, the less prepared you are for the longer road ahead. And this brings us to the next problem. It isn't only the flashy gurus or high-energy speakers promoting shallow confidence. Even the everyday advice people repeat to themselves, phrases meant to strengthen them, can quietly have the opposite effect. Instead of helping, they slow you down. Why generic confidence advice makes you less efficient? Here's the bigger issue. Much of the generic confidence advice people repeat to themselves each day doesn't make them sharper, it makes them slower. Phrases like "just believe in yourself" are intended to sound supportive, but in practice they often replace the deeper check-ins that actually drive progress. Instead of asking questions like "do I have a clear plan?" or "what specific step is next?" the advice stops you at the surface of good feelings. It provides reassurance without structure. And in work, reassurance without structure almost always adds friction rather than removing it. On its own, belief isn't harmful. You need at least some confidence to initiate tasks. But belief on its own is not the same as what psychologists call self-efficacy, the sense that you can handle a specific challenge because you've built the competence for it. Albert Bandura's research on self-efficacy showed this decades ago. Belief helps, but it only translates into persistence and performance when paired with skills, planning, and repeated action. Put simply, belief plus competence beats belief alone. When people substitute vague encouragement for strategy, they trade grounded capability for fragile enthusiasm. Take a concrete example. Imagine someone preparing for an important exam. Standing in front of a mirror and repeating affirmations may ease their nerves. Affirmations can make them feel calmer in that moment, but that activity will never replace targeted review or practice problems. The short-term comfort disguises the gap in preparation. On test day, the result will reflect the quality of the evidence, the practice and strategy, not the mood. This is why the advice, while it feels empowering, quietly undercuts efficiency. You spend minutes or hours lifting mood instead of laying down the foundation needed for actual success. When these rituals become daily, the erosion compounds. Many people develop pre-work routines built around self-talk, hype music, or declarations about their capability. The risk isn't in getting ready. The risk is in mistaking emotional readiness for measurable progress. It creates a subtle training loop where your brain learns to equate surges of energy with achievement. By the time you sit down, you feel like you've already crossed a finish line. That premature sense of accomplishment delays real completion, and because nothing has been finished, the ritual has to be repeated again just to restart. The cycle can easily burn hours while output stays stagnant. Now look at how this plays out when someone chases the feeling of being confident more than clarity about their work. If a person wants to write a book, the obvious progression is to draft an outline, break down chapters, then commit to word count targets. But generic advice adds another barrier. First, get into the right mindset. Suddenly, writing doesn't start until some invisible internal requirement is met. If they don't feel fully confident, they hold back. When they finally begin, attention drifts toward how confident they feel rather than how many words are being written. The work is delayed because the signal for progress is being measured in mood instead of action. This is the contradiction baked into broad confidence mantras. They advertise freedom from hesitation, yet they install more of it. They make you wait until a feeling arrives, until you feel ready enough, confident enough before beginning. Every delay is time lost. And in reality, most meaningful work starts in the absence of confidence. It begins in uncertainty, in small steps, long before belief has caught up. That is the piece generic advice hides. That doubt is not the obstacle, but often the starting condition. Training yourself to accept action without complete confidence builds resilience. Training yourself to wait for perfect confidence builds hesitation. There's a simple replacement that sidesteps this trap. Instead of asking yourself, "Do I feel ready?" you can ask just one practical question. What specific 20-minute task will move this project forward? That single reframe shifts the focus from emotional state to clear action. Neuroscience on goal setting supports this. Concrete, time-limited tasks activate planning networks in the prefrontal cortex. They anchor your focus and make distraction less likely. You don't need to summon an entire reservoir of belief. You need one specific action that stacks into evidence. This shift becomes obvious when you compare planning versus endless pep talk. Setting out your tasks in simple steps removes the dependency on emotional chemistry. Even on low-energy days, the list tells you where to place your attention. As each step is crossed off, you accumulate completion points, proof that scales backed out naturally. With generic advice, you inflate mood but never store evidence, so you end up recycling encouragement without progress. With structure, you manufacture progress first, then confidence grows as a byproduct. What makes this so tricky is that the rituals of self-talk often feel productive. When you recite affirmations or repeat optimistic lines, your brain responds with the same chemicals it uses to mark achievement. You genuinely feel uplifted, which simulates the satisfaction of getting something done. But the task list remains untouched. It's comparable to redrawing the same blueprint for a building every day, congratulating yourself on how detailed it looks, while the site itself never changes. The illusion of progress can be strong enough to mask the cost for weeks, even months. This illusion also serves the ego in the short term. Encouragement shields you from discomfort by narrowing exposure to flaws, gaps, or pending risks. You feel secure, but only because reality has been postponed. Fast forward to an actual deadline, whether an exam, a project submission, or a client presentation, and those overlooked holes become unavoidable. Because the earlier days were spent inflating reassurance instead of identifying weak points, the stress blooms larger and later. Ironically, the advice meant to prevent panic is what guarantees a crisis under pressure. That's why efficiency erodes slowly in this cycle. Nobody questions the time spent feeling good about themselves. Few people regret a moment of positivity, but real progress can't be hidden forever, and eventually, the gap shows. Hours spent in motivational routines accumulate, subtracting from the hours that could have been invested in practice, feedback, or iteration. Those missing hours are what would have constructed actual self-efficacy. Without them, you become an expert in working on your mood, but not in strengthening your skills. The brain notices the difference. The quiet realization that your optimism doesn't match your performance seeds doubt, which fuels the urge for even more pep talk. The trap doubles back on itself. The point is not to discard belief altogether, but to put it in the right position. A small amount of belief is the ignition, it gets you moving. But efficiency is built by what follows: planning, breaking work into measurable parts, and sticking with them. Confidence becomes more stable when you link it directly to that track record. Otherwise, generic advice tricks your system into thinking you're advancing while your actual capacity freezes in place. The gap between mood and output widens, and so does frustration. And here's where the pattern leads next. If general pep talk isn't enough to move progress forward, where does durable confidence really come from? What makes one kind of belief temporary and another kind reliable? That answer isn't hidden in another ritual or routine. It sits in how your brain itself encodes confidence. The 2025 Brain Science Revelation. The breakthrough in 2025 neuroscience is changing how we think about confidence. For decades, confidence was treated as a personality trait, something you were either born with or not. But recent studies suggest it's less about trait and more about training. Researchers using brain scanning tools like fMRI and EEG now see confidence as a skill, something the brain learns and strengthens through specific actions, much like a muscle built through consistent exercise. One of the key findings is that confidence doesn't live in a single location. Instead, it emerges from a network of brain regions working together. The prefrontal cortex plays a central role by handling planning, decision-making, and long-term focus. When you complete a real task, those neural circuits get direct reinforcement. At the same time, the hippocampus, our brain's memory hub, replays those experiences, reminding you of past follow-through and preparing you for the next step. Evidence-based action creates a loop. Finish a task, store it as proof, then recall that proof when you're about to start something new. The more often this loop is repeated, the more efficient and reliable it becomes. Another piece of this loop involves dopamine, the neurotransmitter most associated with motivation and reward. But here's the important nuance. Dopamine isn't just the chemical of pleasure, it's a teaching signal. Studies suggest it marks behaviors worth repeating because they led to progress. When you close out a task, dopamine reinforces that moment in the brain's reward circuits, sharpening the link between effort and outcome. Over time, this reinforcement builds anticipation. Your brain learns to look forward to completing tasks, not just starting them. That anticipation itself becomes fuel for focus. The opposite happens with fake confidence, which triggers dopamine without evidence. The brain enjoys the rush but never connects it to steps that move you forward. There's also what researchers call the winner effect. Initial success doesn't just boost mood, it changes biology. Prior wins can increase the likelihood of future wins, both by reshaping confidence networks in the brain and through shifts in stress hormones. In simple terms, success acts like armor. It makes setbacks feel smaller and keeps momentum carrying forward. But it's important to be cautious here. This effect, while observed in both animals and humans, is still being studied. The strength and limits of it aren't fully understood yet. What's safe to take away is this: even small victories matter far more than they appear, because each one acts as a training rep for your neural system. Treat each completed step, no matter how small, as rewiring your brain to hold focus a little better next time. This combination of planning circuits, reward signals, memory reinforcement, and the winner effect all point to one conclusion. Confidence is less about pumping yourself up and more about feeding your brain consistent evidence. Every small action creates biological adjustments that make the next action easier. And unlike fleeting bursts of hype, these adjustments accumulate like compound interest. Each win builds the architecture for the next. Consider how this plays out in practice. Two people set out to start a new side project. One spends weeks rehearsing a polished pitch and absorbing motivational slogans. They feel ready in spirit but have little to show. The other makes a concrete list of steps and focuses on finishing even the smallest ones, drafting 2 sentences, sending 1 email, testing 1 rough prototype. To outside observers, the polished pitch may look better. But inside the brain, the second person is stacking evidence. With each finished task, the prefrontal cortex records repetition, the hippocampus logs memory, and dopamine ties the effort to a reward. A month later, their neural systems are already more tuned for persistence. They don't just feel prepared, they've rewired themselves to sustain momentum. What makes this finding different from older ideas about confidence is the stability of the process. Feelings of confidence rise and fall based on sleep, mood, or stress. But evidence doesn't fade. If you completed something yesterday, that completion is unchanged today. Your memory can retrieve it and use it as proof, regardless of how you feel in the moment. Over time, this gives evidence-based confidence far more durability than confidence made of surface performance. This also flips the traditional productivity story on its head. The common belief was that you needed confidence first before you could perform well. What the new data suggests is that performance, even in very small increments, actually drives confidence. Success reshapes the brain into a system that expects more success. Instead of waiting for confidence to make you act first, and let the brain recalibrate from the proof. It's a reversal that has major consequences. It means people can stop waiting to feel ready before they begin. Readiness grows out of evidence. To make this less abstract, picture task completion like strength training. Every small win is a repetition. Each rep doesn't look like much, but what builds is the adaptation in your neural fibers. With enough reps, the weight you once struggled with now feels easy. The same is true of focus and planning. The early stages of a project may require effort, but as completions accumulate, the circuits that control attention and persistence adapt until the work feels smoother almost by default. The lesson here is simple. Don't underestimate the brain effect of closing even the smallest loop on your task list. None of this should be confused with motivational spectacle. A surge of hype may feel strong in the moment, but neuroscientists note it doesn't lodge deeply in the circuits that carry weight over time. The brain registers the rush as a short thrill and lets it go. Evidence, by contrast, embeds into the prefrontal and memory systems that foster consistency. That difference explains why some people burn out chasing one motivational high after another, while others progress quietly with a growing sense of certainty. The latter are training their brains with reps of proof, not performances. The practical takeaway is straightforward. Don't waste energy waiting for the right emotional weather. Instead, collect small wins as routine training sessions for your brain. Break down a task, finish a step, and record it. Think of those completions as literal reps, subtle but effective rewiring of the very circuits that control focus, decision-making, and resilience. Do this long enough and the confidence you carry won't be fragile. It will be integrated into the way your mind operates. The revelation of 2025 isn't about promising quick fixes or redefining charisma. It's about evidence showing that confidence is built action by action. Feelings fade, but proof anchors itself into your neural networks. Each small step wires your brain a little stronger for the next. And understanding this creates an interesting contrast with the advice many people fall back on. Because while small wins actually charge your system, trying to fake the same energy creates a different effect altogether. The hidden cost of faking it. Fake it till you make it. Almost everyone has heard that phrase, and many people have tried to live by it. On the surface, it promises a shortcut. If you put on the performance of confidence, eventually the real thing will appear. But the truth is less glamorous. For most people, that catch-up moment doesn't arrive. Instead of closing the gap between image and ability, they get stuck in a cycle of acting confident on the outside while carrying doubt on the inside. What at first feels like a clever disguise slowly becomes a drain, because the show takes more energy than the work itself. This is the hidden cost of faking it. The reason this idea spreads so easily is that pretending feels easier than practicing. Pretending offers comfort in the moment. You walk into a room projecting confidence, and for a few seconds you even convince yourself. That's appealing because it feels faster than taking deliberate actions that generate real progress. But the cost is clear. While pretense offers the illusion of momentum, it teaches your brain nothing useful. When the show ends, you're left with the same insecurities you started with. And those insecurities grow louder the longer they remain unaddressed. Psychologists explain part of this pattern through imposter syndrome. When you put on a front that isn't earned by evidence, a divide develops between the self you present and the self you know. You might sound authoritative during a meeting, but you still remember the tasks you avoided or the preparation you skipped. That mismatch plants the fear of being caught. Over time, the act doesn't build confidence, it fuels anxiety. You feel fraudulent not because you lack ability entirely, but because you've given more attention to the performance than to the actual development of competence. Here is where the danger compounds. Each time you put on a mask, the brain notices the difference between what was shown and what was real. You may get a nod of recognition or a burst of approval, but the results underneath don't back it up. The memory of that gap quietly erodes self-trust. Instead of thinking, "I did it before, I can do it again," you carry the thought, "I got away with it that time, but what if I don't next time?" You begin to crave validation rather than results. And as psychologists warn, rewarding appearances over ability promotes overconfidence that doesn't align with actual performance. That is brittle confidence, built on a fragile foundation. The problem is not just internal stress, it is the toll on productivity. When you constantly rehearse how you appear, that effort eats up the resources needed for output. Energy shifts away from tasks and toward presentation. In practical terms, you spend more time asking yourself how convincing you seem and less time completing something real. The irony is painful. The strategy intended to protect you from doubt ends up magnifying it because the work remains unfinished and the cycle strengthens. Think about the moment the mask slips. Maybe during a project you hit a question you can't answer, or during a presentation a detail doesn't line up. In that instant, the thin wall between the outside show and the inner reality collapses. You feel the weight of exposure. Your confidence doesn't just dip, it crashes because the failure isn't only about the task itself. It's also about the realization that the entire performance was hollow. That memory sticks more strongly than the approval ever did, reinforcing doubt instead of dissolving it. The best way to understand this trap is with a simple metaphor. Faking confidence is like trying to charge your phone with a potato. It looks inventive, it might even convince someone briefly, but it doesn't raise your battery percentage. When you need full charge to handle a demanding task, the truth shows you don't have power stored. The costume never stored energy at all. That's why people end up feeling drained after long stretches of pretending. They are running on surface decisions rather than internal reserves. The cumulative effect is a loop that reinforces itself. You pretend, the pretense fails, the failure increases doubt, and that doubt drives you to pretend more. It is exhausting because the performance must be maintained constantly, while progress stalls underneath. Over time, exhaustion itself becomes an anchor that prevents forward motion. You work harder at holding a pose than at moving a project forward. The hidden cost also shows up in decision-making. People who rely heavily on the outer show often overestimate their readiness, ignoring the difference between presentation and capacity. This lack of awareness can lead to risky choices, missed weaknesses, and poor performance when stakes are high. That is why imposter syndrome so often appears alongside procrastination and fear of failure. The energy poured into maintaining appearances leaves less bandwidth for facing the discomfort that produces growth. But there is a way out of this loop, and it does not require giving up on confidence altogether. Instead of faking, you can build proof of competence in small, concrete steps. Proof doesn't need to be dramatic. If you pause right now and write down one small task you've completed in the last 48 hours, you already have a piece of evidence. Your brain registers that completion differently than it registers encouragement or applause. Evidence creates a track record that doesn't disappear once the external approval fades. The reason this matters is that self-trust lives in outcomes, not appearances. When you can point to finished work, however small, you train your brain to believe you'll be able to finish again. As those completions accumulate, doubt shrinks naturally because there's a history to contradict it. The more you record genuine evidence, the less you need to rely on theatrics. Each step plugs directly into the success mechanisms in the brain that researchers describe. Action, proof, and reinforcement combine to wire the circuits that sustain focus under pressure. This is why faking may feel lighter at first but becomes heavier over time, while genuine action feels heavier at first but becomes lighter with repetition. The short-term comfort of pretending gives no long-term resilience. Small, repeated completions do the opposite. They demand effort in the moment but reduce effort in the future. One road accumulates instability, the other accumulates steadiness. The real cost of fake it till you make it is not just wasted energy, It's the erosion of trust between you and yourself. Without that trust, every goal feels steeper, every doubt feels sharper, and every setback feels like proof against you. With that trust, setbacks remain temporary. Building that trust requires evidence, not illusion. So if faking leaves you fragile, what replaces it? If performance confidence becomes brittle, what form of confidence actually endures when pressure shows up? That question is where the real shift begins, and it leads directly to the kind of confidence that fuels actual work. Introducing productive confidence. What we need to look at now is something very different from everything we've dismantled so far: productive confidence. This is not about mood, charisma, or image. Productive confidence is evidence-based self-trust built from repeated completed actions. Every time you follow through on something tangible, you add to a foundation that remains steady no matter how uncertain or anxious you feel. Supported by behavioral and neuroscience work, from Bandura's principle of self-efficacy to reinforcement learning research, this type of confidence doesn't rely on appearances. It relies on proof. Think about the contrast. Performance confidence is rewarded in public spaces because it's visible. Someone who speaks the loudest in a meeting, someone polished on camera, someone who looks the part. But when those moments pass, the show doesn't convert into the stamina needed for serious output. That's why it can collapse under pressure. Productive confidence, on the other hand, doesn't require applause. It asks only one thing: did you say you would do it, and did you follow through? Every yes to that question becomes a brick. Stack enough of them, and you create stability that doesn't disappear once the spotlight is gone. This definition is practical because it recenters confidence around actions you control. It could be as small as answering one email you've been avoiding. It could be completing a 20-minute writing sprint when you would normally scroll through your phone. These small completions may look unimportant from the outside, but they are deposits into your bank of self-trust. The brain records them as real evidence that you finish what you start. Over time, those deposits accumulate into something far more durable than temporary motivation. What makes this different is the sequence. Many people say, once I feel confident, then I'll start. That path rarely works because feelings fluctuate and rarely arrive on schedule. Productive confidence flips the order. You begin even while feeling uncertain. The action itself generates the proof. The proof strengthens trust. That trust, in turn, sustains you the next time. Waiting for confidence before you act is like standing at the driver's seat, refusing to turn the key until the fuel magically appears. But once you turn the key, once you take that simple action, the system powers on. Let's make the difference clear through a simple example. Two people are asked to prepare for a presentation. The first relies on hype. They spend time repeating affirmations, practicing forceful body language, and reminding themselves that they are naturally persuasive. But when the questions start, their preparation fails them. The second keeps it simple. They set up a plan, write one page of notes each day, run through drafts, and review feedback. By presentation day, they're not dazzling in appearance, but they know their material because they've done the work. One version builds a mask, the other builds evidence. Only the second survives doubt when it arrives. Productive confidence can seem less exciting because it looks ordinary. It's showing up while tired, writing the paragraph you promised yourself, closing the loop on a repetitive task. It's documenting progress you might even call boring. Yet those plain tasks are powerful because they add weight to your record. Each small act reminds your brain, I follow through. And that memory is stronger than a pep talk because it can't be argued with. No applause necessary. The proof speaks on its own. This kind of confidence is also quieter because it doesn't depend on how you look. By the end of the day, when the lights are off and you're alone with yourself, appearances don't matter. What matters is whether the evidence is there or not. If it's only appearance, the silence feels heavy. If you've stacked actions, however small, the silence feels steady, because you know you have done what you said you would do. Another way to think about productive confidence is like building muscle. Each time you resist the pull of procrastination and move one step forward, you strengthen it. Each failure you learn from adds another layer of resilience. It doesn't require perfection, and it doesn't require total certainty in advance. What it requires is consistent repetition, small workouts of action that your brain comes to rely on. Over time, it works just like muscle memory. Your brain begins to default to trust, because that pathway has been reinforced again and again. And this means doubt is not the enemy. Many people believe real confidence means being free of fear, but that's the misconception. Productive confidence doesn't erase doubt, it coexists with it. You might still feel nervous before the meeting, tired before the writing session, restless before answering the email. The emotions don't vanish. But productive confidence allows you to act anyway because the pattern of evidence gives you backup. Instead of waiting for fear to quiet itself, you bring proof that you have handled it before. This is what separates proof-driven confidence from applause-driven confidence. Performance confidence asks, "How convincing do I look?" Productive confidence asks, "What did I complete?" The difference is critical. External attention fades quickly, but evidence doesn't. The paper you finished last week, the note you solved yesterday, are still there today. They're not fleeting moods, they're facts. That is why productive confidence is sustainable. It attaches itself to reality, not presentation. There's also a psychological ripple that accumulates from this approach. Psychologists call it self-efficacy, the belief you can handle a specific challenge because you've prepared and done it before. The more tasks you anchor through completion, the stronger that belief becomes. Neuroscience supports this. Every successful follow-through strengthens networks in the prefrontal cortex responsible for focus, while dopamine circuits mark that follow-through as rewarding. This loop trains your brain to anticipate the satisfaction of completion, making it easier to start again tomorrow. The reverse makes the gap clearer. People who confuse confidence with performance often burn out quickly. They run on external highs, and when those highs vanish, so does their motivation. But people who cultivate productive confidence don't need external highs to keep going. They can rely on the stack of evidence they've already created. That stack quiets the doubt and stabilizes their path forward. One has to keep proving a show, the other has already stored the proof. So how do we define productive confidence in plain terms? It is evidence-based self-trust built from repeated completed actions. It doesn't demand that you eliminate doubt, and it doesn't ask you to feel ready before you begin. It simply grows from proof. With every action taken, every task finished, every moment of follow-through, you store another unit of trust in your own capacity. That trust is what carries forward when energy is low or fear is high. And this is why productive confidence is neither glamorous nor fragile. It doesn't need crowds. It doesn't need slogans. It doesn't even need you to fully believe in advance. It needs bricks of proof, stacked consistently, until the structure becomes unshakable. Over time, you stop wondering if you can handle challenges, not because you convinced yourself, but because your history shows you already have. The natural question then becomes, if productive confidence rests on building that record of proof, how do you structure your life to generate it? Because the concept is simple, but the process of making it real requires a system. Building your bank of proof. To develop reliable self-trust, you need to give your brain more than good intentions. You need a record to lean on, a bank of proof built from actions you can point back to when doubt arrives. This isn't about waiting for motivation or memorizing affirmations. It's about stacking undeniable evidence of what you've done, day after day, no matter how small. That stack becomes your anchor when emotions shift unpredictably, because facts hold when feelings don't. The method is straightforward. One daily micro-task, log it immediately, and then acknowledge it to yourself. That's the formula. If you finish even a tiny action, writing a paragraph, solving one practice problem, sending a single message, you immediately record it and then you pause for 5 to 10 seconds to say, "I did it." Those 3 moves, repeated consistently, rewire how your brain interprets progress. The task creates the evidence, the log stores it, and the acknowledgement reinforces it. Simple but powerful. It's worth emphasizing why the logging step matters. Human memory distorts progress. Failures feel loud and heavy, while small wins fade from memory almost instantly. That bias leaves you feeling further behind than you really are. Logging corrects this imbalance. A visible record, digital or written, forces your brain to see that effort really happened and prevents critical moments from disappearing. Without a log, the data of your own success simply slips away, leaving you with only recollections of what went wrong. The best part is you don't need a complicated tool. A simple template works. Date, one-line win, and time taken. That's it. March 6, drafted email, 12 minutes. Over a week, you'll have 7 lines. After a month, 30. These small notes hold more power than they seem because each time you flip through them, you remind yourself that progress is tangible. And when setbacks tempt you to doubt yourself, that log shows reality more clearly than your mood ever could. At this point, some people resist the simplicity. They tell themselves that little wins don't matter, that only big milestones deserve recognition. But those milestones, like finishing a book, launching a project, or running a marathon, are nothing more than collections of small wins. Big accomplishments are built from layers of the very tasks people dismiss. By undervaluing the small finishes, you throw away the building blocks of confidence itself. What seems trivial is precisely what compounds into resilience. This is why the act of acknowledgement is essential. Too many people cross something off and move instantly to the next demand. Without pausing for internal recognition, the brain doesn't encode the moment as important. Taking even a few seconds to notice, "I finished this," reinforces the connection between effort and completion. Reinforcement matters because it tells your brain to strengthen the pathways that make follow-through more likely next time. This isn't indulgence, it's training. Tracking tools sharpen this feedback loop even further. A simple planner with boxes, an app with check marks, or a single notebook creates opportunities for closure. A checked box or crossed line might appear small to the eye, but in your brain it functions like a completed circuit. Closure signals your system. Intention was honored, work was done. Repeat that signal consistently, and your self-identity shifts. Instead of "I try to follow through," your brain starts adopting a stronger belief. "I am the kind of person who follows through." Belief backed by evidence is what turns fragile confidence into something durable. The invisibility of this process makes it easy to ignore. No audience applauds when you tick one box on a list. No one congratulates you for logging a single draft paragraph. Because proof often builds quietly, people chase louder displays instead, performances that others will notice. But the irony is that silent records build the kind of confidence that outlasts recognition. While applause disappears quickly, a log waits patiently and remains with you whenever you need it. Quiet work produces the kind of steadiness no performance can supply. To see how this difference works, compare two paths. An artist decides to sketch 10 minutes each day and makes sure to log each attempt, however messy. Over a few months, they have a stack of sketches where once there was nothing. Their log proves repeated practice. Even if doubt creeps in, they can open the record and see tangible proof of growth. Another artist avoids logging, relying instead on energy and self-promotion, starting projects only when they feel inspired. Weeks pass and their record remains nearly empty. One has visible evidence, the other has only words. When pressure arrives, confidence favors the first. Think of every logged action as a brick. A single brick doesn't impress on its own, but when stacked across weeks and months, the wall becomes something you can lean against. During hard periods, fatigue, stress, uncertainty, that wall answers questions more persuasively than enthusiasm alone. Instead of asking, "Can I handle this?" your brain recalls the pattern. "I have handled this before." That record becomes your stabilizer, independent of how confident you feel in a given moment. To make this real, here's a simple challenge. For the next 7 days, log one daily micro-win. Nothing large or complex, just one small, specific action per day. At the end of the week, review your notes on day 8. You'll likely be surprised by how much weight those 7 lines carry. The exercise proves that momentum doesn't need to wait for energy or mood. It begins from recognition of what you've already done. And that recognition changes how your brain interprets ability. This shift also reveals why waiting to feel confident before acting is so costly. Without a bank of proof, you have no reliable record when fear or doubt shows up. Yet when you have even a few logged completions stored, those doubts lose their strength. Each small task accumulates into a body of evidence that reframes future challenges as workable. Momentum doesn't depend on morning inspiration. It depends on whether you've trained your system to store proof it can call back during difficulty. In summary, building your bank of proof does not require time-consuming systems or public validation. It requires a repeatable practice, one daily action, logged and acknowledged. That's the cycle. Each repetition deposits another unit of trust. Build enough deposits, and your confidence stops depending on how you feel. It starts depending on what you've proven. This is not theory for later. It's something you can integrate right now. Pick one task you can finish today, record it in a sentence with the date, and take 5 seconds to recognize it as done. Do that tomorrow and again the next day. Watch how quickly the record grows into something your mind can lean on. And that record is what transforms productive confidence from an idea into a habit. Once you begin filling that bank, the next step becomes connecting it to a clear system. So your growing record isn't scattered, but aligned. The step-by-step productive confidence system. Now it's time to lay out the actual framework, the step-by-step productive confidence system. This is the structure that turns scattered effort into consistent evidence, so you're no longer relying on mood or hype. It's 4 steps you can repeat daily: values, micro-wins, log, and use proof during doubt. To make it easy to remember, think of it as VMLU. Those 4 letters are the backbone of productive confidence, and once you practice them, the process begins to run almost automatically. Step 1 is values. Before you try to build a bank of proof, you need to know what your proof is supposed to demonstrate. Defining your values and linking them to concrete goals sets the anchor that keeps your work meaningful. This doesn't have to be abstract. Write one sentence that directly connects a value to a daily action. For example, if I value clarity, today I will produce 1 draft paragraph. Or, if I value reliability, today I will complete my checklist before logging off. That one sentence ties your actions to your identity. Research into self-efficacy shows that when goals are grounded in values, they're far more likely to translate into consistent action because your brain recognizes them as personally significant. Step 2 is micro-wins. Once you know what you stand for, you turn those values into tiny, achievable daily actions. The smaller and more specific, the better. Instead of improve fitness, decide walk for 10 minutes after lunch. Instead of become more focused, choose write 1 sentence before checking email. Neuroscience research shows the brain locks onto small, measurable goals more effectively than vague intentions. Each completed micro-win becomes a reinforcement signal, proof that you can manage what you set out to do. And here's a practical trick to make this even easier. Anchor your micro-win to an existing routine. Habit researchers call this habit stacking. Pair the new action with something you already do. For example, after brushing your teeth, write 1 sentence in your planner. After making coffee, review 1 line of notes. By attaching evidence-building actions to established habits, you reduce friction and almost guarantee follow-through. Step 3 is log. This is where many people stumble. Doing the action is important, but logging it ensures it becomes permanent evidence. Without a log, your memory will exaggerate failures and discard small wins, leaving you with a distorted picture of progress. The log corrects that bias. It can be paper, a digital tool, or a simple voice memo. What matters is writing or recording the completion immediately and keeping it visible. Imagine a notebook with dates and a single line. April 14, finished 1 sketch, 12 minutes. After a month, you have 30 lines of proof instead of 30 blurred days of half-remembered effort. This record is more reliable than mood and becomes the foundation of self-trust. Step 4 is use. The real strength of this system shows when doubt arrives. The natural instinct is to repeat affirmations, scroll for motivation, or hope anxiety passes. But that doesn't quiet your brain when fear spikes. The log does. This is where you use your proof bank directly instead of falling back on surface pep talks. When your mind insists, you can't handle this project, you don't argue with it, you open your log. You review a chain of completed actions that prove otherwise. Evidence interrupts spirals faster than generic reassurance because it comes from your own history. Each entry tells you, you have acted before, even when you felt uncertain. You can act again. Now let's combine these 4 steps into a system that runs daily. Start by clarifying 1 value at the beginning of each week. Next, assign yourself 1 micro-win per day that expresses that value. Complete and log it immediately, then pause 5 to 10 seconds to deliberately acknowledge it. And when doubt rises, you review the log before seeking outside encouragement. This loop is tight, clear, and repeatable. Values decide direction. Micro-wins supply proof. The log stores that proof. Usage in moments of uncertainty turns the stored record back into fuel. VMLU. That's the cycle. The strength of this framework is that it doesn't rely on enthusiasm. You don't have to feel ready or produce constant willpower. You just follow the 4 steps. By practicing them, you are literally training your brain to equate consistent action with trust. Smart goals research reinforces this. Goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound light up the brain's reward system more reliably than vague ambitions. Micro wins are simply smart goals scaled down to the smallest unit possible. Each one delivers clarity, completion, and reinforcement in a way your mind can't ignore. Start very small to prove to yourself how this works. Set one value sentence today, such as, "If I value growth, I will read 1 page." Perform the micro win, read the page, log it immediately, then pause to acknowledge it. When doubt questions whether you're consistent, look back at that record. Repeat tomorrow. Over weeks, the entries accumulate into undeniable proof. The question isn't whether you feel confident anymore. It becomes, did I complete my step today, and is it logged? Simple, repeatable, and effective. One key benefit of this method is scalability. By beginning with micro wins, you lower the barrier to action so that your brain can adjust. As completions accumulate, you naturally expand your actions. A single paragraph becomes a page, 10 minutes of work becomes an hour. And because you built this growth on evidence, not hype, your confidence scales with it. Unlike fragile external motivation, this compounding doesn't collapse under pressure. It grows stronger the more consistently you apply the framework. Link this back to the neuroscience. Each finished action logged as proof tunes your brain's planning centers and reward circuits to look for completion again. Dopamine reinforces task closure. The hippocampus stores memory of those completions. The prefrontal cortex strengthens its ability to manage focus when new challenges arrive. It's a biological training system. Each step of VMLU carves deeper grooves, making follow-through feel easier and more natural the longer you repeat it. This structure also bypasses the common trap of chasing big, lofty ambitions without breaking them down. Many people set huge targets, then feel overwhelmed, thinking they lack drive. But the problem isn't drive, it's structure. By defining values, aligning them to small micro wins, logging them, and using proof during doubt, you circumvent paralysis. You teach your brain to succeed in increments it can process, while still anchoring those increments to long-term meaning. That way, progress feels real, and direction stays clear. Adopting this framework shifts the questions you ask yourself daily. Instead of asking, "Do I feel confident right now?" you switch to, "Which value am I acting on today? What micro win will I log as proof?" That shift turns confidence from a mood into a practice. You replace insecurity with a working structure. And the predictable outcome of working this system is a steady compound effect. Your bank of proof grows, your trust hardens, and your actions become more consistent, regardless of how you feel in the moment. Summarize it this way: VMLU. Value set direction. Micro wins generate evidence. Logs preserve it. Using proof during doubt transforms evidence into resilience. 4 steps, practice daily, build confidence that doesn't collapse. And what makes this especially powerful is that it merges 2 elements most people treat as separate: productivity and confidence. The real insight is that they don't have to work against each other. They can reinforce one another. And when they do, the outcome changes everything. Where productivity meets confidence. What happens when confidence and productivity stop competing and start working together? For many people, these 2 ideas seem like separate tracks, one about energy and presence, the other about discipline and output. But when they connect, something important shifts. Productivity stops feeling like a grind of forced discipline, and confidence stops being a fleeting mood. Together, they create a reinforcing process where each action strengthens both your results and your trust in yourself. This is where productivity meets confidence. The difference between surface-level confidence and grounded confidence becomes immediately clear. The kind built on appearances and charisma looks powerful but fades quickly. You might feel energized while the spotlight is on you, but as soon as it's gone, you're left looking for the next boost. That cycle drains more than it sustains. By contrast, confidence built from repeated follow-through has a completely different effect. Each completed task adds to your foundation, making the next challenge easier to approach. Proof doesn't fade when the room empties, it stays with you, reminding you of what you're capable of. That's why actions feel lighter over time. You stop trying to summon energy from nowhere because evidence supplies its own momentum. To make this more concrete, picture someone who struggles with hesitation at work. They practice the polished routines, confident posture, firm handshake, strong tone. On the surface, it looks convincing, but inside, the same self-doubt lingers. Deadlines get missed, projects stall, and the quiet question, "Am I really capable?" never goes away. The outer performance earns a nod or two, but it doesn't change the outcome. Now contrast that with what happens when the same person commits to one small daily proof, such as finishing a single task each afternoon and recording it. The notebook slowly fills with completed actions. Over time, the weight of that visible evidence shifts their perspective. Instead of chasing belief, they're grounded in fact. They can see what they've done. That contrast is the turning point where productivity and confidence start meeting in practice, not just in theory. Momentum grows because action builds confidence directly. Failures, when they happen, don't collapse everything. A mistake stings, but the proof of dozens of previous completions still stands. That record takes the edge off self-doubt. Productivity no longer depends on good moods or flawless streaks. It depends on the structure of evidence already in place. And that's what makes confidence sturdier. Even when one project falls apart, the record of follow-through in other areas balances the ledger. The result is emotional stability that hype can't provide. This point matters because true confidence is not about eliminating fear or sustaining nonstop optimism. As confidence researcher and author Mel Robbins notes, it's better understood as the willingness to try. To take action even when fear and uncertainty are still present. Each time you do that, you reinforce what psychologists call the confidence-competence loop. You act, learn from the result, and become more capable, which builds more confidence. Sometimes the attempt works, sometimes it fails, but either way, it adds to your capacity. The key difference is that confidence emerges from participation, not from warming yourself with slogans. When productivity generates those attempts, the loop builds naturally. Neuroscience supports this link as well. Studies suggest that each small win reinforces attention and planning networks in the brain. In other words, when you complete something, even something minor, your brain strengthens its ability to focus and manage the next challenge. Failures register too, but the act of showing up and completing small steps is still logged as training data for your planning system. That's why productive confidence isn't just a motivational phrase, it's a biological training effect. Actions convert into competence, and competence reshapes how well you can direct your focus toward future work. Another important factor is resilience. Achievements, even modest ones, act as buffers against stress. Researcher Ian Robertson describes the winner effect, the tendency for prior wins to not only boost confidence, but also to change how the brain responds to pressure. Small completions matter here because they serve as your personal wins. With each one, your brain not only stores evidence of ability, but also learns to regulate stress better. The result is that, when bigger challenges arrive, you feel steadier. Not because fear vanished, but because your nervous system has rehearsed handling pressure with success already in the background. This link between productivity and confidence reveals why consistency matters more than bursts of effort. Sporadic wins give you temporary highs, but if you never track them or stack them, they fade out of memory while failures grow louder in your mind. By logging and acknowledging each step, you shift that bias. The visible record makes sure your brain sees a trail of evidence rather than just scattered moments. Over time, that trail rewires both your attention and your emotional response to stress. That's where productivity does more than complete tasks. It actively builds the foundation of durable confidence. There's an important caveat to mention here. Not all confidence is good confidence. Overconfidence, especially when it drifts away from actual competence, can cause just as many problems as doubt. It can push people to ignore weaknesses, skip preparation, or take risks that exceed their real capacity. So the goal isn't to chase limitless confidence, it's to build calibrated confidence from real completions. Actions balance ambition with accuracy, keeping confidence tied to what you've proven rather than what you want to believe about yourself. And it's worth adding something many people need to hear. You don't have to abandon all performance skills. Presentation matters in real life. Speaking well, showing up with energy, giving a strong impression, all of these have value. You can keep the charm and presentation skills, just don't rely on them alone. They become more powerful when paired with evidence-based confidence, because then the image has content behind it. Instead of a costume, it's an extension of your record. When you practice this kind of integration, productivity no longer feels like a drain, and confidence no longer feels like a mask. You stop cycling between pretending and burning out, and start stacking quiet repetitions that give you resilience on demand. The act of finishing tasks builds trust. That trust cushions failures, making them learning opportunities instead of identity threats. Productivity and confidence reinforce each other in a cycle that builds strength instead of exhaustion. The essential takeaway is this: productive confidence does two things at once. It gives you an evidence-driven boost to resilience and attention, and it transforms each small win into preparation for the next challenge. Together, those effects remove the gap between hesitation and action. You don't wait for confidence to show up before you move. You move, and in the process, confidence arrives. And this raises an interesting question. If these two forces can connect this way, what happens once the cycle really starts picking up speed? How does confidence not just support productivity, but actually amplify it into more than you expected? That is the turning point we need to explore next. The confidence productivity flywheel. The confidence productivity flywheel is the point where repeatable action stops being just discipline and starts functioning as its own engine. Instead of treating confidence as a mood and productivity as sheer willpower, the two begin to feed into one another. Each completed action strengthens your belief that you can handle the next. That belief calms distraction, sharpens your focus, and fuels more output. The results then cycle back into more confidence. With enough repetition, this no longer feels like effort stitched together by hype. It becomes a flywheel, a self-reinforcing system that gains speed every time you push it forward. The entry point is always the same: one specific action. It doesn't matter how small. Writing a single paragraph, finishing one short workout, or clearing a single task from your list is enough to begin. What matters is closure. Your brain interprets a finished action as an achievement, and that small achievement sets off reinforcement learning. Repeated completion turns into anticipatory signals that make the next step easier. Your brain doesn't just reward the moment of finishing, it learns to look forward to the act of finishing. That anticipation itself becomes fuel. Even the smallest results matter. Completing something, no matter how minor, gives your brain evidence to work with. Researchers studying the winner effect note that success reshapes not only skill, but also the way the brain responds under pressure. A single win, recorded and remembered, increases the chance of the next win, not by magic, but because the nervous system learns that effort reliably converts to outcomes. This is why people who collect micro-wins often build momentum much faster than those aiming only at giant breakthroughs. The success compounds quietly in the background, teaching the brain to expect progress. From these results, confidence begins to build. This isn't the artificial show that collapses under stress. It is a confidence drawn from fact. When hesitation whispers that you might not be able to handle the task, your brain consults its record. The written words, the completed sessions, the logged progress. That retrieval happens quicker with each repetition. Hesitations that used to last hours shrink into seconds. Instead of arguing with yourself or waiting for the right mood, the proof argues on your behalf. Confidence becomes less about imagination and more about recognition of what you've already done. Once that confidence takes hold, focus becomes sharper. When you trust your capacity, you shed the constant inner debate about readiness. Cognitive space clears, and your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for attention and planning, can dedicate resources fully to the task in front of you. This leads to longer stretches of uninterrupted work, smoother transitions between tasks, and fewer lapses into distraction. Stronger focus produces stronger output, and that output reinforces the entire system again. To visualize the difference, think of it like running on two machines. Many people burn out on a treadmill that doesn't move forward. Bursts of confidence pep themselves up, bursts of productivity follow, but when the feeling dips, they slide backward to the same starting point. The flywheel operates more like a machine that converts each step into forward momentum. Every action creates a little more speed, and that speed makes the next action easier. Energy multiplies instead of draining away. Fake confidence keeps you in place. Productive confidence moves you forward, one repeatable push at a time. A practical way to test this is by choosing a single micro-habit and running it consistently for 2 weeks. For example, commit to one 10-minute focus session every day and log it as you go. At the end of those 2 weeks, don't just check the number of sessions. Notice how your ability to focus changes. Most people report not just better results, but easier starts. because the flywheel has begun to normalize action and lower resistance. That's the mechanism at work, turning repetition into anticipation and anticipation into momentum. But no cycle guarantees perfection. Setbacks still happen. Missed deadlines, skipped tasks, failed attempts, these will always appear. The difference is that when your confidence rests on accumulated proof rather than a fragile facade, single failures carry less weight. Researchers emphasize that evidence cushions failure. One loss doesn't erase the history of completions already stored. Instead of being dismantled by missteps, you reframe them as part of a larger record of persistence. Confidence becomes resilient because it leans on patterns, not single moments. The flywheel also scales over time. Small completions, repeated day after day, don't just add up, they compound. Each repetition tells your brain to expect more, to prepare earlier, and to focus longer the next time. That is why consistency almost always outperforms bursts of raw enthusiasm. Enthusiasm peaks and crashes, but structured repetition leaves a record. Over months, the difference is exponential. The person following the loop doesn't just get more done. They become someone whose system produces energy instead of waiting for it to arrive. Importantly, this loop doesn't eliminate fear or doubt entirely. What it does is shorten the gap between hesitation and action. Confidence, when rooted in proof, makes you capable of trying even with uncertainty present. This is why the flywheel works best when goals are realistic. Not massive leaps that feed despair when missed, but tangible steps that deliver early wins. Achievable goals give the system enough evidence to grow steadily. Unrealistic ones can stall it before it gains traction. Each goal should be challenging enough to count, but attainable enough to complete. Over the long run, the flywheel becomes your safety net. Whether you're tired, distracted, or unsure, there's less need to summon motivation from thin air. The structure you've built generates recurring momentum. Even if one attempt goes wrong, the cycle absorbs it into the larger framework of progress. Instead of seeing yourself as derailed, you see yourself as in motion, because the accumulated history points to persistence, not collapse. This is what shifts people from fragile self-belief to durable confidence, knowing that the system itself sustains them. The clearest distinction between those who succeed quietly and those who struggle loudly is not talent, and rarely raw effort alone. It's whether they've trained their system to recycle proof into momentum. When confidence and productivity operate separately, you lurch between energy spikes and exhaustion. When they run as a flywheel, each side multiplies the other. Evidence generates trust, trust sharpens focus, focus increases productivity, productivity stores more evidence. Round after round, the system becomes lighter to operate, while confidence becomes heavier in its foundation. And this brings us to the broader truth. The fuel that keeps the flywheel spinning isn't performance, appearance, or even constant enthusiasm. It's proof. Concrete completions are the turning points that reinforce every stage of the system. Without them, the flywheel never gains pace. With them, it transforms the way you move through work and handle doubt. The direction this points us toward is clear. If shallow confidence drains your energy and stalls your focus, then evidence-driven confidence not only sustains you, but multiplies your productivity over time. Understanding the mechanics of the flywheel shows why abandoning appearances in favor of proof matters more than ever. Confidence, at its core, is not something you perform, it's something you practice. Each small action you complete becomes part of a record that shapes how much you trust yourself the next time challenge appears. This is not about waiting for the perfect mindset. It's about starting now, stacking proof one task at a time, until the trust becomes too solid to ignore. Here's your experiment. For the next 7 days, log 1 micro win per day and post a single result in the comments. Share your proof, however small, because appearances fade, proof remains.